What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plizont's podcast, filled to the brim with glitchy analysis and freezing cold takes, so cold that they're boiling hot. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Hungry Howie's Baton Rouge. Guys, check out their website for takeout and delivery deals. Right now, they've got an awesome special. Get a large one-topping pizza for just $7.99. Thanks so much to Hungry Howie's Baton Rouge. Now, today, everyone, we're talking NFL, NBA news. We got a little bit of college football. We're going to do our transfer portal spotlight once again. And then we've got a Plizont freezing cold take, so cold that it's boiling hot. So let's go ahead and get started with some NFL. All right, so the first thing that we've got on the board is a prompted question. I want you guys to answer it down in the comments. But the question is, what do you need to win a Super Bowl as a team? So in my opinion, there are three different ways that you can get to a Super Bowl. One, have a talented quarterback on his rookie contract. So we see teams like the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the Bengals with Joe Burrow. All of these guys on rookie deals, cheap contracts, get to and win Super Bowls. The second way that I see teams getting to the Super Bowl is by having role-playing quarterbacks and stacked rosters. So Jared Goff with the Rams, Jimmy Garoppolo with the 49ers, Nick Foles in his one run with the Eagles. All three of those guys really got there, not because of their own talents, but because they were able to play well with superstar rosters. Now, last but not least, a way you can get to the Super Bowl is by having all-time great quarterbacks. So Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, those guys, regardless of what you're paying them, regardless of the talent around them, they have enough talent themselves to get to a Super Bowl. So if you're a team in that position, where do you go from there? So, to answer that second question, where do you go from there? The answer is, I don't really know, because there's a lot of teams that don't have any of those three scenarios that can't just full out tank, but at the same time can't compete for Super Bowls. We've seen teams like the Denver Broncos post Peyton Manning trying to find that guy over and over and over again, most recently with Russell Wilson, but they just can't get to that Super Bowl type caliber play. Next up, we've got teams like the Rams who drafted Jared Goff, and they finally found their guy by trading Goff to the Lions for Matthew Stafford. There are many different avenues, but basically what I'm trying to say is there's no one answer. You can go through the draft and get Trevor Lawrence. You could be the Buccaneers and build a stacked roster and then sign Tom Brady. But in terms of, having the skill to do that, I don't know if there is any kind of skill. I think a lot of luck is involved and a lot of positional factors go into these equations. Like, for example, the Buccaneers, if they didn't sign Tom Brady, they weren't competing for any type of Super Bowl in the next year. They had just gotten done with the Jameis Winston 30 for 30, okay? I don't think any of these teams actually know where they're going in terms of the next step. Now, they claim that they do, but the Saints, before they signed Derek Carr, did not have any kind of idea where they were going right after the Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton fiasco. So like I said, there's not an exact answer of what you do. I think one, a lot of luck comes into it. And two, it's like a big gray area. Like nobody actually knows what they're doing in the NFL. You just get lucky by basically educatedly guessing who do you think is going to become the next it guy. Did the Chiefs know that Patrick Mahomes in his first 5 years was going to be a two-time MVP, two-time Super Bowl winner? Absolutely not, in my opinion. Now, did they think he was going to be a good quarterback? Yes. But that type of caliber? No. They got extremely lucky that they found the diamond in the rough. No other team did. So, like I said, no answer to actually build towards a Super Bowl. You can build a good roster and be good for forever like the 49ers and never win a Super Bowl. You can draft your franchise quarterback, have him win an MVP, and then nothing else comes of it like Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. All of these teams are just playing a guessing game. So with those questions and guessing games in mind, let's talk about what you can and can't do right in the NFL offseason. You can still make correct and incorrect moves. So today, I'm talking about the 4 biggest mistakes made by NFL teams in this offseason. Number 1, the Washington Commanders made a major mistake by not grabbing a franchise quarterback this offseason. There are 3 different things the Commanders could have done this offseason that would have gotten them a franchise guy. Number one, they could have gone after a free agent quarterback like Derek Carr, and they didn't go grab him. Number two, they could have traded for Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers. Not a lot of rumors going on there. They didn't make moves at all to try to get those players on their team. And number three, most importantly, they did not draft a franchise guy. Now, I'm not the biggest Will Levis fan, but I definitely think he could have either gone to the 16th pick with the Commanders, or the Commanders could have traded up in the second round to grab him. I definitely think the Commanders made a mistake by not trying to grab a franchise guy. They've got an extremely talented defense that has been slowly dwindling away over the last 4 to 5 years. And competitiveness is going further and further down the drain with this team. And it's almost time to hit the full reset button. I would say pull the trigger sooner rather than later. Next up on the teams that I think made a huge mistake in the offseason, the Buffalo Bills made an egregious error by not drafting or picking up a solid running back. Now, they did sign Damian Harris in the offseason, but he's had some injury concerns, and he's not what I would identify as a big bruising back, which is exactly what I think the Buffalo Bills need. Josh Allen took an absolute pounding last year. I really think that the running back situation was the number one position to solve for the Bills in the offseason. And the fact that they didn't adequately replace Devin Singletary, to me, is a huge mistake. I would have either traded for Derrick Henry or found a running back in the draft to really help Josh Allen out. For example, Zach Charbonnet, the running back out of UCLA, could have been a huge help to the Bills, and they failed to get him, and that's why I think they made a huge mistake. The third team who I think made an egregious error in this offseason that really could have done something different was the Kansas City Chiefs signing Jawan Taylor to an $80 million deal. I'm a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. I got to see Jawan Taylor up front. I think he is a good tackle. I do not think he's an $80 million tackle. He gave up 35 sacks in his first 4 seasons, more than any other AFC tackle since those 4 years began in his rookie year. Jawan Taylor, I really do think he is a solid tackle, but I do not think that he is an $80 million eat up your salary cap space type tackle, like a Trent Williams, who I think is an $80 million tackle. So that is why I think the Kansas City Chiefs made a mistake by signing him and replacing him with Orlando Brown Jr. Last but not least, in my teams that made mistakes in the offseason, the New York Giants made the biggest error of all the teams by signing Daniel Jones to a 4-year, $160 million deal. I'm not a Daniel Jones hater. I just don't think that he is a guy that you can pay that kind of money to and win meaningful football games. Shout out to the Minnesota Vikings. That's who Daniel Jones should be thanking the most, because those 2 major wins over the Vikings in the regular season and the playoffs got Daniel Jones this contract. That being said, the Giants have basically written off the next 4 years as maybe getting in as the 6th seed or the 7th seed in the NFC, and that's about it. I never expect the Giants to win this division or make the divisional round of the playoffs, and it's thanks to this massive contract that they gave Daniel Jones. All right, moving on, let's talk about some really important NBA news. First up, Joel Embiid wins the MVP. In my opinion, he was the MVP. He earned this award. The deserve factor, yes, he deserved it, but Embiid had a dominant regular season. That's why he won the MVP. That's what the MVP is. However, we have seen a trend that the MVP award costs you something in the offseason. There have only been 2 MVPs in the past 20 years to win the MVP and win a championship in the same season. Why is that? Because we see guys like James Harden give it their absolute all in the regular season to get these teams to successful positions and win the MVP. But then when it's time for the playoff, they're not there. And it's not because they've given up. It's not because they're out of shape. It's because they simply just don't have the energy after backpacking a team for an entire season. And that's what Joel Embiid did. And now he is injured in the playoffs, and he's not 100% going up against the Celtics. and it's probably going to cost him the series and another opportunity to get a chance for an NBA championship. Now, speaking of championships, let's talk about Anthony Davis and the fact that it is Anthony Davis's time to be the number one guy in Los Angeles. An obvious point. But it wasn't an obvious point at the beginning of this season. So one, I want to shout out Anthony Davis for taking the reins of this Lakers team and starting to carry it throughout the playoffs. And two, I want to point out that the Lakers have basically decided that they are willing to deal with these spurts of excellence from Anthony Davis because they've realized that these spurts can win you an NBA Finals any year, anytime. Anthony Davis was not playing this way at the start of the season. He was really not playing this way in the middle of the season when they made all of those trades. He really picked it up in terms of his health and his effort and his success near the end of the season, and he's playing like a top 5 player. Now, that being said, my one and only concern is his health. Can he stay healthy through a physical playoff series? Can he stay healthy going into next season? I really don't think that the Lakers have any choice but to ride with him for this year, the next year, and the next. Now, that being said, I think that the Golden State Warriors are still going to win this series because they play basketball like a seasoned boxer. They're not coming out and throwing haymakers in the first game. They play this entire playoff series like a boxing match. Now, within each game, they pick their spots and they sink their punches in, like they did in the fourth quarter of Game 1 when they went on a 14-0 run. The Warriors are capable of that at any point in time in any game in a 7-game series. But the Lakers might have a chance to sneak past the Warriors in Game 2 if and only if they can withstand Golden State's punches. That's why the Warriors have won 4 championships in 8 years, because they have that knockout punch in their bag at all times. And I really do think that the Warriors are going to do that exactly in Game 2 and Game 4 of this playoff series and be able to win it in 6 games. Next up, let's talk about Dillon Brooks. Now, he has been all over the media for the last 2 to 3 weeks talking about how he wants the Lakers, talking about how LeBron is old and that he's there for all the smoke. He's not, and it's okay that he's not. Does he deserve the hate that he's gotten? It's hard to say. Yes. Basically, he talked himself in to all of this hate because he's talking about the greatest player in today's game, possibly the GOAT. But can he still be on an NBA team? Absolutely. I've heard a lot of stuff talking about he's going to the Guangdong Tigers and he's going to the Shanghai Sharks. He's not going to some Chinese basketball league. He's not going to Australia. He's staying here in America, and he will get signed by an NBA team in the offseason. So an NBA team will sign Dillon Brooks this offseason. Let's talk about the 5 teams that I think could sign him. Now, qualifiers. This team needs wing defending, and the team needs a vocal leader, but not the vocal leader. So number 5, I think, is the Dallas Mavericks. When I look at the Mavericks, I think they really need another wing defender. Kyrie and Luka are both defensive liabilities, and Brooks can definitely pick up the slack on that end. He is a catch-and-shoot shooter, which is good for Luka's shot creation and whatnot. So I do think the Mavericks are a good place to land. However, they have to get on their voice in that locker room. Dillon Brooks cannot be that voice because we're going to see a repeat of this season. And that's not what Dillon Brooks or any organization wants to see. The 4th team that could land Dillon Brooks, and I think it's a decent idea, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, they've got their star player and their vocal leader in Anthony Edwards. To me, the rest of this team is not soft, but not as physical as they need to be. And I think that Dillon Brooks provides that type of physicality. If he can take a backseat role in terms of being vocal, he can be a great addition to this Timberwolves team. Now, the 3rd team that I think could use Dillon Brooks is the Sacramento Kings. And I think it makes a difference between being bounced in the first round and becoming conference finals or finals contenders. The Sacramento Kings have the greatest offense in statistical NBA history. Their defense, not so much. Dillon Brooks, all things being said, is a great defender, and that's exactly what the Kings need on the wing outside of De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk. Having Harrison Barnes and Dillon Brooks and Domantas Sabonis on the floor all at the same time reminds me a lot of the Golden State Warriors small ball death lineup. I'm really excited to see that if the Kings sign Dillon Brooks, but I don't know if that would happen. The number 2 team that I could see signing Dillon Brooks is a team that fits him very well. The New York Knicks. Blue collar, hardworking, Tom Thibodeau, lots of minutes, hard defense. All of those things describe Dillon Brooks as a basketball player. The one thing that he would have to rein in is his vocalness. And I think that Tom Thibodeau, of all the coaches in the league, could definitely do that and make Brooks the best basketball player that he could be. But the number 1 team that could sign Dillon Brooks and benefit the most this offseason are the Phoenix Suns. It is extremely evident throughout these playoffs that outside of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and maybe a half-hobbled Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton, the Suns have little to none left on their roster. And I think that Dillon Brooks could be a great piece for a team trying to compete for a championship like the Phoenix Suns. I am a huge fan of him going there. I definitely think he could make an impact in the catch and shoot game and especially on the defensive side of the ball. So the Phoenix Suns signing Dillon Brooks, that's my number 1 team to look out for in this offseason. This next topic is all about dysfunctionality. The Detroit Pistons have just fired assistant general manager Chris Murphy. Why? Because of sexual harassment allegations that are most likely true. I'm not going to say whether or not they're true. I'm not trying to get sued for defamation. So just saying, all I'm looking at is the reports. Apparently, he touched on a woman in the office, his executive assistant. He told her terrible, inappropriate things at the workplace. He ended up firing her in 2022, and it's taken an entire year for this investigation to be complete and for him to be fired. This is why the Detroit Pistons have won 80 out of their last 302 games. The dysfunctionality in an organization goes from top to bottom. If your executive office is not serious about playing competitive basketball, your coaching staff will not be, and your players definitely will not be. The Pistons have a lot of young talent, but they're not being developed, they're not playing competitive, and it is because of this dysfunctional front office, and it has to change. Last but not least, in covering the NBA, we're going back to our first topic and talking about why the Boston Celtics are the kryptonite to Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. The reason why is because they are an exact counter to what the Philadelphia offense is. The Philadelphia offense is Joel Embiid getting touches, James Harden creating shots for others. The Celtics have the best defending backcourt in the NBA. Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, Marcus Smart, not to mention Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown play phenomenal perimeter defense. And then when it comes to Joel Embiid getting his touches in the paint, the Celtics are phenomenal at swarming him and making sure that any shot that he takes is contested. That's why he had a poor performance in Game 2. Now, he did have 5 blocks, but the rest of that 76ers team, especially James Harden, had an awful time trying to get good open looks. Thus the reason why Harden shot so poorly. That's why I have the Celtics winning this series in 5. I think that Game 1 was a complete fluke. Last but not least, we're talking college football. Let's start with my transfer portal spotlight. Jordan Hudson is going to SMU, I think. Now, SMU reportedly is offering him a bag to get there. Now, SMU has been paying players since the 80s. So I really do think that Jordan Hudson is going there. And I think that he has the potential to be the next Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice was the wide receiver out of SMU who just went to the Kansas City Chiefs in the 3rd round. I was a huge fan of his game. A lot of people didn't know about him. I think he caught close to 1,600 yards last year. Absolute animal. I really do think that Jordan Hudson can be that next guy at SMU. SMU needs a little bit more talent in the quarterback room, but SMU has been hitting the portal hard. And it is very evident that they're going to be extremely relevant next season. I'm predicting them to go 11-1 or 10-2. 10-2 at the worst. SMU played a lot of hard games last year, including Maryland, TCU, Cincinnati, and BYU. They lost all 4 of those games by 1 possession. And this next year, they only have 2 really difficult games on their schedule. Now, those games are TCU and Oklahoma. I think that SMU can beat TCU and Oklahoma. Now, SMU plays a much easier schedule this year compared to last. Their 2 hardest games are TCU and Oklahoma. Every single team has got a circle calendar game where that is what they are really eyeing and focusing on, and that's exactly what these games are for SMU. Oklahoma has had some issues last season with talent and performance with their new head coach, and TCU lost the farm to the draft. They got 8 players drafted, a couple of other unsigned or undrafted free agents. I definitely think SMU has the potential to beat TCU, and I really do give them a solid chance to beat Oklahoma. I'm a really big fan of their head coach. He was an offensive coordinator at Miami, offensive coordinator at Auburn. He is really, really talented when it comes to the offensive end. And with this new transfer, Jordan Hudson, they have the potential to go in to those places, TCU and Oklahoma, and win big. And that's going to do it for this episode of Plizont's podcast. Guys, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button, the follow button, wherever it may be, however you may be listening. Please leave us a comment. Do anything you can to support this channel. I very much appreciate it. That is going to do it. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next time.